As we arrived at the Christmas dinner, my mother opened the door and said, "What are you doing here? Didn't you get a text? You're not invited." I replied, "You didn't send anything." Then my aunt shouted, "Just let them come." As they let me in, we saw nasty looks. My sister threw a folding chair and pointed us to sit near the trash can while everyone acted normal. When I confronted them, my father came towards me and slapped me across the face, saying, "You weren't invited, so that's what you get as a welcome gift." So my daughter stood up and said, "Can you do the thing you said you'd do if it felt bad again?" So I did. 5 minutes later, my mom started screaming. The snow was falling in thick clusters that December evening when my daughter Emma and I pulled up to my childhood home. The house looked exactly as it had for the past 30 years, white colonial with green shutters, a wreath on the door, and golden light spilling from every window. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Emma, who had just turned 16, glanced at me from the passenger seat with those dark eyes that saw too much for her age. "Mom, are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. I forced a smile. "It's Christmas, sweetheart. Family tradition." What I didn't tell her was that my stomach had been churning since we left our apartment 2 hours ago. My relationship with my family had always been complicated, but this year felt different. The phone calls had become shorter, less frequent. My mother's voice carried a strange edge during our last conversation 3 weeks prior. Still, I convinced myself I was imagining things. Families have rough patches. People get busy during the holidays. We gathered the presents from the trunk, carefully wrapped boxes for my parents, my sister Rachel, and my nephew Tyler. Emma carried the homemade cookies she'd spent all afternoon decorating, her specialty being snowmen with lopsided smiles. The cold bit at my cheeks as we walked up the familiar driveway, past the garden gnomes my father refused to put away even in winter. I rang the doorbell, my heart hammering against my ribs in a way that felt ridiculous for a 38-year-old woman visiting her own parents. The door swung open, and there stood my mother, Patricia, wearing the red velvet dress she wore every Christmas. Her expression froze the moment she saw us. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out sharp, cutting through the cold air like a knife. "Didn't you get a text? You're not invited." The words hit me like a physical blow. Emma's hand found mine, squeezing tight. I struggled to process what I'd just heard, my mind racing through possibilities. Had I missed something? Was there a scheduled change? "You didn't send anything." My voice came out weaker than I intended, almost pleading. My mother's face remained stone. Behind her, I could see the dining room table set for 12, the good china gleaming under the chandelier. Laughter drifted from deeper in the house. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon made my stomach turn. "Patricia, for God's sake." My Aunt Linda appeared behind my mother, her face flushed with what looked like embarrassment. "Just let them come. It's Christmas." The two women stared at each other for a long moment. My mother's jaw clenched, but she stepped aside without another word. Emma and I walked through the doorway into what felt like hostile territory. The warmth of the house did nothing to thaw the ice in my chest. The living room fell silent as we entered. My father, Richard, sat in his leather recliner with a tumbler of whiskey. My sister Rachel stood by the fireplace, her expression twisting into something ugly the moment she saw me. Her husband Mark avoided eye contact entirely. Tyler, who was 8, stared at Emma with confusion. My Uncle Joe and Aunt Linda exchanged glances that I couldn't quite read. My cousin Madison pretended to be fascinated by her phone. "Well, this is unexpected," Rachel said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She crossed the room and grabbed a metal folding chair from the corner, the kind we used for outdoor barbecues when we ran out of regular seating. She unfolded it with a loud snap and placed it deliberately next to the kitchen doorway, inches from the trash can that smelled faintly of potato peels. She pointed at it. "Since we weren't expecting you." Everyone else sat at the beautifully decorated table with the nice chairs, the holiday centerpiece, the good silverware. Emma looked at me with tears threatening to spill, but I squeezed her hand and led her to the folding chairs. We sat down without a word. The metal was cold even through my jeans. Conversation resumed around us as if nothing had happened. Rachel talked loudly about Tyler's soccer achievements. My father discussed his golf game with Uncle Joe. My mother brought out appetizers, cheese, crackers, those little sausages wrapped in pastry, and served everyone except us. The tray bypassed our corner entirely. I tried to catch my father's eye. He'd always been the more reasonable one, or so I'd thought. He lifted his whiskey glass and drank deeply, still refusing to look my direction. 30 minutes passed in this surreal nightmare. Emma nibbled on the cookies we'd brought, offering me one that I couldn't swallow past the lump in my throat. My daughter deserved better than this. I deserved better than this. The casual cruelty of it all finally broke something inside me. I stood up, the folding chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The sound cut through the chatter like a gunshot. "Okay, what is going on here?" My voice came out stronger than I felt. "Someone want to tell me why we're being treated like garbage in my own family's home?" Rachel's eyes glittered with something mean. "You really don't know?" "Obviously not, Rachel. You always have to make everything about you," she hissed. "Mom and Dad are finally putting their foot down. You're not part of this family anymore." The words should have hurt more than they did, but I'd been preparing for this my entire life without realizing it. Every forgotten birthday, every achievement of mine that went unmentioned while Rachel's were celebrated, every time I was blamed for things that weren't my fault, it all made sense now. Because I divorced Jeffrey? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Because I chose to leave an abusive marriage? Jeffrey was a good man. My mother shouted from the dining room. You ruined everything because you couldn't just be happy. Jeffrey had broken my ribs twice, given me a concussion, and controlled every aspect of my life for 7 years. The divorce had taken 3 years to finalize because he fought me every step of the way. My family had never believed me about the abuse. They said I was exaggerating, being dramatic, trying to ruin a good man's reputation. He almost killed me, I said quietly. Here we go again with the lies. Rachel threw her hands up. You know what? You're pathetic. You've always been pathetic. Couldn't keep a husband, couldn't keep a decent job. I'm a nurse practitioner, I interrupted. I have a perfectly good job. Whatever. She waved dismissively. The point is, we're done pretending we want you around. We only invited you to things because we had to. Now we don't. My father stood up then, his face red from whiskey and anger. He crossed the room toward me with heavy steps. I'd seen that look before, usually before he'd send me to my room without dinner or take away whatever small joy I'd found that week. But I wasn't a child anymore. He raised his hand and slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed through the room. My head snapped to the side, my cheek exploding in pain. Emma screamed. Aunt Linda gasped. Uncle Joe half rose from his chair, then sat back down like a coward. You weren't invited, so that's what you get as a welcome gift. My father spat. You want to disrespect this family? You want to air our dirty laundry? This is what you get. My ears rang. My face burned. But something crystallized in my mind in that moment, absolute clarity about what needed to happen next. Emma stood up, her voice shaking but determined. Mom? Can you do the thing you said you'd do if it felt bad again? Every eye in the room turned to my daughter, then back to me. I met Emma's gaze and saw the trust there, the faith that I would protect her the way I'd always promised. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Yes, baby. I can do that now. My hands shook slightly as I opened the recording app. I'd been recording from the moment my mother opened the door. Every word, every insult, every moment of this nightmare was captured in crystal clear audio on my phone. But that wasn't the thing Emma meant. I pulled up my contacts and dialed a number I'd saved 3 months ago. It rang twice before a professional voice answered. Detective Morrison? This is Sarah Mitchell. I'm calling to file an assault report. My father just struck me in the face in front of multiple witnesses, including my minor daughter. We're still at the location, 342 Maple Street. I have video evidence and witnesses present. The room exploded. You did not just do that. Rachel shrieked. My mother's face went white. Sarah, hang up that phone right now. Don't you dare. My father started toward me again, but Uncle Joe finally found his spine and stepped between us. Richard, stop. Just stop, Uncle Joe said quietly. I kept talking to Detective Morrison, giving her the details she needed. Yes, I was safe for the moment. Yes, multiple witnesses were present. Yes, I would wait for officers to arrive. No, I didn't need medical attention immediately, though I would document the injury. 5 minutes after I hung up, my mother started screaming. You're going to destroy this family. You're going to ruin your father's reputation. He's a respected accountant in this community. Her voice climbed higher with each word, becoming almost hysterical. How could you do this? How could you be so selfish? Patricia, she's bleeding, Aunt Linda said, pointing at my face where my father's ring had split my lip. I don't care. My mother grabbed a decorative plate from the mantel and threw it against the wall. It shattered into pieces. She's always been the problem. From the day she was born, she's been nothing but problems. Rachel joined in, her face contorted with rage. You vindictive bitch. You're really going to have your own father arrested on Christmas? He assaulted me, I said calmly. That's a crime. After you provoked him. There's no provocation that justifies violence, I replied. Emma moved closer to me, and I put my arm around her shoulders. And you all witnessed it. Every single one of you. Mark, Rachel's husband, spoke for the first time. I didn't see anything. He looked around at the others. Did anyone else see anything? My mother latched onto this lifeline. No one saw anything. You fell, Sarah. You've always been clumsy. I recorded everything, I said quietly. From the moment you opened the door. The second explosion of rage was even worse than the first. My father lunged for my phone, but I'd anticipated this. I stepped back and held it out of reach. It's already backed up to the cloud, I told him. And I sent a copy to my lawyer 30 seconds before I called the detective. That was a lie, I'd only set it to auto backup, but they didn't know that. My father's face turned purple. You planned this. You came here to set us up. I came here for Christmas dinner with my family, I said. You made the choice to assault me. You all made the choice to treat my daughter and me like trash. I'm just making the choice not to let it slide anymore." The sound of sirens in the distance made everyone freeze. My mother started crying, big dramatic sobs that might have moved me once upon a time. Rachel paced back and forth, her hands pulling at her hair. My father sank into his chair, suddenly looking much older than his 62 years. "Please," my mother begged, mascara running down her face. "Please don't do this. Think of the family. Think of Tyler, he doesn't need to see his grandfather arrested." "Tyler doesn't need to learn that hitting people is acceptable," I countered. "And I am thinking of the family. I'm thinking of Emma, who just watched her grandfather assault her mother. I'm thinking of myself, who spent 38 years being scapegoated and abused by the people who were supposed to love me." Aunt Linda approached me carefully. "Sarah, honey, I'm so sorry. I should have said something years ago. I should have stood up for you." "You're right," I agreed. "You should have." "I'll testify to what I saw tonight," she said quietly. "If you need me to." Uncle Joe nodded slowly. "Me too." Rachel whirled on them. "You're both traitors." "We're being honest," Uncle Joe said tiredly. "For once in this goddamn family, someone's being honest." The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers, 1 male and 1 female. Officer Chen and Officer Rodriguez. They separated us, took statements, photographed my face. The split lip was swelling now, and a bruise was forming on my cheek where my father's knuckles had connected. Officer Rodriguez was gentle as she documented the injury, asking Emma if she was okay, if she felt safe. My father was handcuffed in his own living room while my mother wailed. The sight should have brought me satisfaction, but mostly I just felt empty. This was my family. These were the people who were supposed to protect me, celebrate with me, love me unconditionally. Rachel screamed obscenities at me as the officers escorted my father out. Mark stood there uselessly. Tyler cried, confused about why Grandpa was being taken away. Madison filmed some of it on her phone, because of course she did. Officer Chen handed me information about pressing charges, about protective orders, about victim services. I took the papers with numb fingers. Emma held my other hand so tightly I thought my bones might crack. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" Officer Rodriguez asked. "We'll get a hotel," I said. Aunt Linda touched my arm. "Stay with us. Please. You shouldn't be alone, and you definitely shouldn't pay for a hotel on Christmas." I looked at her for a long moment, trying to gauge her sincerity. Her eyes were red, and she looked genuinely distressed. Uncle Joe nodded his agreement. "Okay," I said finally. "Thank you." We gathered our coats and the presents we'd brought. I'd be damned if I left those behind. Emma carried her cookies. As we walked toward the door, I turned back to look at my mother and Rachel. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said. "I would have forgiven almost anything. If you'd just been honest with me, if you just said you didn't want me here, I would have been hurt but I would have stayed away. But you had to be cruel about it. You had to humiliate my daughter. You had to make sure I knew exactly how little I mattered to you." "Get out," my mother hissed. "Gladly." We left. The cold air felt cleansing after the toxicity of that house. Emma cried in the car on the way to Aunt Linda's. I held her while she sobbed, my own tears freezing on my cheeks. "I'm sorry, baby," I whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to see that." "Why do they hate us?" she asked. "I don't know. Some people are just broken in ways that can't be fixed." Aunt Linda and Uncle Joe lived 20 minutes away in a modest ranch house. They set us up in their guest room and made us hot chocolate. Aunt Linda apologized over and over, explaining how she'd watched me be scapegoated my entire life, how she failed me by not speaking up. "Your father always had a temper," she said quietly. "Even when we were kids. Your mother enabled it, and then Rachel learned from both of them. You were the only one who questioned things, who pushed back, and they hated you for it. I just wanted them to love me, I admit it." "I know, sweetheart. I know." The hot chocolate grew cold in my hands as Aunt Linda began sharing stories I'd never heard. She told me about the time I was 7 and won the school spelling bee. My mother had refused to attend, claiming she had a hair appointment. When I came home with my ribbon, excited to show everyone, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. Rachel, who was 10 at the time, grabbed the ribbon and flushed it down the toilet while my parents laughed. "I was there that day," Aunt Linda said, her voice cracking. "I brought you a congratulations card and a little trophy I bought at the dollar store. Your mother threw them away the moment I left. She told me later that you needed to learn not to show off." Emma's head lifted from where she'd been half dozing against my shoulder. "Grandma did that?" "Your grandmother has always been threatened by your mother's accomplishments," Uncle Joe interjected. "Even as a little girl, Sarah was bright and kind. She asked questions, wanted to understand how things worked. Patricia saw that as defiance." I wiped at my eyes, mascara smearing on my fingers. "I remember that spelling bee. I studied so hard. I thought maybe if I won something big enough, they'd finally be proud of me." "You were always enough," Aunt Linda said firmly. "They were just too damaged to see it." She continued talking, and with each story, another piece of my childhood clicked into place. The time I made the honor roll and my father said grades didn't matter for girls anyway. The time I saved up babysitting money to buy my mother a birthday present, a scarf I'd seen her admiring, and she returned it the next day, saying she didn't want charity. The time Rachel broke my mother's favorite vase and blamed me, and I was grounded for a month despite my protests. Why didn't you ever tell me this before? I asked Aunt Linda. She looked down at her hands. Cowardice, mostly. Your father cut people out of his life who questioned him. I was afraid of losing access to you girls entirely. I thought I could do more good by staying in your life, even if I couldn't openly defend you. I see now how wrong that was. Uncle Joe reached over and squeezed his wife's hand. We should have fought harder. We should have called CPS when we suspected things were worse than we saw. CPS? Emma sat up straighter. I took a shaky breath. This was territory I'd never wanted to explore with my daughter, but maybe she deserved the truth. Your grandfather's temper wasn't new. He never hit me as a child, but there were other things. Punishments that went too far. Being locked in my room for days. Having my belongings thrown away as discipline. That's abuse, Emma said quietly. Yes, I agreed. It is. The weight of acknowledging it out loud settled over the room. For so long, I'd minimized it in my mind. Other kids had it worse. At least I had a roof over my head and food to eat. At least the physical violence had been rare. But emotional abuse was still abuse, and the scars ran just as deep. Aunt Linda made up the guest room with fresh sheets that smelled like lavender. She laid out spare toothbrushes and toiletries, even finding an oversized t-shirt for Emma to sleep in. The kindness felt foreign after the cruelty we'd just experienced. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, she looked up at me with those wise, sad eyes. Are you okay, Mom? I will be, I promised her. We both will be. Good. Because you were really brave tonight. She paused, picking at the edge of the blanket. I've been wanting to tell you something. Grandma said something to me at Thanksgiving. When you were in the bathroom. My stomach dropped. What did she say? She told me that you were crazy. That you made up lies about Dad, about Jeffrey, to get attention. She said I shouldn't believe anything you told me about him. Emma's voice wavered. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. But Mom, I remember him. I remember him yelling at you. I remember the time he pushed you into the wall and you said you tripped. I wasn't that little. Rage flooded through me, hot and sharp. My mother had tried to poison my daughter against me, to plant seeds of doubt about the abuse I'd survived. She'd attempted to isolate me from the one person who mattered most. Emma, I need you to hear this. I took her hands in mine. Everything I told you about Jeffrey was true. The abuse happened. I have medical records, police reports, testimonies from doctors and social workers. Your grandmother lied to you because she's never wanted to accept that she pushed me to stay in a dangerous marriage. I know, Mom. I've always known. She swallowed hard. I felt bad for not defending you to her. I felt like a coward. You were protecting yourself, baby. That's not cowardice. That's survival. I brushed her hair back from her face. And now you know why we won't be going back there. Ever. She nodded, relief clear in her expression. I'm glad. Is that bad? Am I a bad person for being glad? Not even a little bit. You're amazing. After Emma fell asleep, I sat in the living room with Aunt Linda while Uncle Joe went to bed. She poured us each a glass of wine, and we sat in comfortable silence for a while. Your mother called me 4 times while we were getting you settled, Aunt Linda finally said. I didn't answer. She left voicemails. Wants me to convince you to drop everything, says you're tearing the family apart. What are you going to tell her? That I testified to what I saw, and I'd do it again. That Richard's actions have consequences. That maybe this family needed to be torn apart. She took a long sip of wine. I'm done enabling them, Sarah. I'm 63 years old, and I'm done pretending. We talked until almost 3 in the morning. She shared more stories, filling in gaps in my understanding of family dynamics. How my father's own father had been a tyrant, how he'd learned violence as a language of control. How my mother came from poverty and married my father for security, then spent her life terrified of losing that security by ever contradicting him. How Rachel had been the golden child from birth because she looked like my father's mother, while I looked like my maternal grandmother, a woman my father despised. It was never about you, Aunt Linda explained. You could have been perfect, and they still would have found reasons to reject you. That's what scapegoating is. They needed someone to blame for their own unhappiness. The psychological term gave me something to hold on to. Scapegoating. I researched it on my phone while Aunt Linda dozed beside me on the couch. The pattern was textbook, one child singled out for criticism while another was idealized. The scapegoated child blamed for family problems. Punished more harshly. Expected to meet impossible standards while the golden child faced no consequences for poor behavior. Reading about it felt like someone had written my biography. That night, Emma fell asleep in my arms in the guest room bed. I stared at the ceiling, my face throbbing, my heart aching. My phone buzzed with text messages, Rachel calling me every name imaginable, my mother begging me to drop the charges, threats from extended family members I barely knew. I blocked them all. The messages kept coming from different numbers. Apparently, my mother was recruiting anyone with a phone to harass me. My second cousin Derek, who I hadn't spoken to in 15 years, sent me a long message about forgiveness and Christian values. My father's golf buddy sent a text calling me disrespectful. Someone from my mother's book club accused me of being an ungrateful daughter. I screenshot every message and forwarded them to Jennifer Park, my lawyer. She told me to keep documenting everything, that this kind of harassment could actually help my case by demonstrating a pattern of intimidation. The next few days passed in a blur. I took emergency leave from work, citing a family crisis. My supervisor, Karen, was understanding. She'd met my parents once at a hospital fundraiser, and had privately told me afterward that my mother seemed difficult. Now I appreciated her intuition more than ever. Emma and I stayed with Aunt Linda and Uncle Joe for a week. During that time, I had the locks changed on our apartment, filed for the protective order, and started gathering documentation of everything I could remember. Old photos where I looked thin and scared. Journal entries from my teenage years describing punishments. A letter I'd written to my college roommate about family problems that she'd kept and now sent me. My therapist, Dr. Michaels, fit me in for an emergency session 3 days after Christmas. I'd been seeing her on and off for 2 years, mostly dealing with the aftermath of my divorce from Jeffrey. Now we had a whole new trauma to unpack. What you experienced was a calculated act of public humiliation followed by physical assault, she said during our session. The fact that they uninvited you but didn't tell you, that they made you sit by the trash can, that they allowed your father to strike you, these weren't heat-of-the-moment mistakes. This was planned cruelty. But why? The question had been eating at me since that night. Why go through the effort of such elaborate punishment? Dr. Michaels leaned forward, her expression gentle but direct. Because you escaped. You divorced Jeffrey despite their pressure to stay. You built a life for yourself and Emma without their approval. You proved you didn't need them, and that threatened the entire power structure of your family. The explanation settled into my bones like ice water. Of course. By leaving Jeffrey, by refusing to stay in an abusive marriage for the sake of appearances, I'd demonstrated independence. I'd shown I could survive without my family's conditional love. That made me dangerous to their narrative. They had to punish you publicly, Dr. Michaels continued. They had to show you, and Emma, what happens when you defy them. It was about reasserting control. Well, it backfired spectacularly. Did it? Or did it reveal who they've always been, and now you're finally ready to see it? I sat with that question for a long time after the session ended. She was right. The mask had slipped, but the ugliness beneath had always been there. I'd just been too conditioned to see it clearly. New Year's Eve arrived. Aunt Linda wanted to do something special, to end the year on a positive note. She invited some of her friends over, women from her gardening club, a couple from their church, some neighbors. They all knew what had happened. Gossip traveled fast in their social circle. What surprised me was how many of them had their own stories. Margaret, who lived 3 houses down, talked about going no contact with her sister 5 years ago. Diane from the gardening club shared her experience with her narcissistic mother. Paul from church mentioned his abusive father and how pressing charges had been the best decision of his life. You think you're alone, Margaret said, refilling my wine glass. You think you're the only one with a messed up family. Then you start talking, and you realize how common it is. Why don't more people talk about it? Emma asked. She'd been listening quietly from the corner of the room. Shame, Diane answered simply. We're taught that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water. When your family hurts you, you feel like you must have deserved it somehow. Like you're the problem. That's exactly how I felt, I admitted. Like if I could just be better, try harder, they might love me. Paul shook his head. Some people aren't capable of real love. They're too broken, too damaged. And the kindest thing you can do is accept that and move on. As midnight approached, we gathered in Aunt Linda's backyard despite the cold. She'd strung up lights and set up a fire pit. We stood in a circle, sharing what we wanted to leave behind in the old year and what we hoped for in the new one. When it was my turn, I squeezed Emma's hand and spoke clearly. I'm leaving behind the belief that I owe loyalty to people who hurt me. I'm leaving behind the shame I've carried for things that were never my fault. And I'm hoping for peace. Real, genuine peace. Emma spoke next. I'm leaving behind the idea that I have to have a relationship with people just because they're related to me. And I hope for a year where Mom smiles more. The simplicity of her wish broke something open in my chest. How many years had I walked around wearing stress like a second skin? How often had Emma seen me anxious before family gatherings, tense during phone calls with my parents, crying after visits? She deserved better. We both did. At midnight, we toasted with champagne, sparkling cider for Emma, and I felt something shift inside me. The year ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be court dates and ugly confrontations and family members choosing sides. But for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. My mother had apparently had some kind of breakdown at midnight and was blaming me for ruining her New Year's. Rachel sent a message saying I'd given our mother a panic attack and I should be ashamed of myself. I forwarded everything to Jennifer Park and then deleted the messages without responding. "You're getting good at this," Aunt Linda observed over breakfast. "At what?" "Not taking the bait. Not rushing to fix everyone else's emotions." She handed me a cup of coffee. "Your mother's had panic attacks whenever she doesn't get her way since she was 20 years old. It's manipulation, honey. Don't fall for it." Uncle Joe nodded from behind his newspaper. "Patricia called here at 2 a.m, crying about how you're killing her. I told her that was dramatic and hung up. She hasn't called back." I felt a rush of gratitude for these two people who were willing to see the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. They were choosing me over their sibling, over decades of family loyalty. That meant everything. We moved back to our apartment on January 2nd. It felt strange walking into our space, knowing my family would never visit again. I'd always kept it clean and welcoming, part of me hoping that maybe this time they'd approve, they'd compliment something, they'd want to spend time there. Now I could decorate however I wanted. Emma and I went to a thrift store and bought colorful throw pillows, artwork with feminist quotes, a rainbow flag for her bedroom. We made our space unequivocally ours, with no regard for what my mother might think of the decor or my father might say about the books on our shelves. It felt like breathing for the first time in years. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. Her name was Jennifer Park, and she specialized in family law and assault cases. She listened to my recording, looked at my photos, and read the police report. "You have a strong case," she said. "But I need to warn you, this is going to get ugly. Your family will fight this." "Let them fight," I said. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen a lot of family assault cases. Most of them end with the victim dropping charges because the pressure becomes too much. Are you prepared for what's coming? Tell me what to expect." She pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "First, your father's lawyer will try to paint this as a misunderstanding. They'll claim it was a minor family dispute that got blown out of proportion. They'll bring up your divorce, suggest you're unstable or vindictive. They'll question your parenting. They'll try to make you look like the aggressor. I have witnesses. I have recording." Which is excellent. But they'll still try. They'll probably file a motion to suppress the recording, claim you made it illegally. We'll counter that you were in a place where you had a reasonable expectation of safety, not privacy, and that you were documenting threats to yourself and your minor child. She made another note. "Second, expect your extended family to pressure you. They'll use guilt, obligation, fear. They'll tell you you're destroying the family. They'll try to make you responsible for everyone else's pain." "Already happening," I said dryly. "It'll get worse. Much worse. Your father might lose his job if this becomes public. Your mother might have health issues from stress. Rachel might use Tyler to manipulate you, suggest you're hurting your nephew. They'll find every pressure point and push." I thought about Tyler, sweet and confused on Christmas night. I don't want to hurt Tyler. "You're not hurting him. Your father hurt him by assaulting someone in front of him. That's important to remember. You're not causing this harm. You're responding to harm that was done to you." Jennifer went through the legal process step by step. The arraignment would happen in mid-January. My father would likely plead not guilty. There would be a pre-trial hearing, possibly mediation if both parties agreed. If it went to trial, it could take months. "What about the protective order?" I asked. "That hearing is next week. Your father can contest it, but given that there are witnesses to the assault and you have documentation, the judge will almost certainly grant it. It'll be temporary at first, then we'll petition for a longer-term order." I left her office with a folder full of paperwork and a sense of grim determination. This was going to be a marathon, not a sprint. But I'd already survived an abusive marriage and a brutal divorce. I could survive this too. The protective order hearing was held on January 8th. My father showed up in an expensive suit with his lawyer, looking every inch the respectable professional. I wore simple slacks and a blouse, my bruised face still slightly discolored even days later. The judge was a black woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She reviewed the police report, looked at my photos, and listened to a portion of the recording. My father's lawyer tried to object to the recording, but the judge overruled him. "Mr. Mitchell," the judge said, her voice cutting through the courtroom. "You struck your daughter hard enough to split her lip and leave bruising. You did this in front of multiple witnesses, including her minor child. Do you dispute these facts?" My father's lawyer tried to answer for him, but the judge held up a hand. I asked Mr. Mitchell. My father shifted uncomfortably. "It was a family matter that got out of hand. I never intended. Yes or no, Mr. Mitchell? Did you strike your daughter?" A long pause. "Yes." "Then this protective order is granted. 500 feet minimum distance. No direct or indirect contact. Violation will result in immediate arrest." She banged her gavel. "Next case." It took less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes to legally separate myself from the man who'd made my childhood a minefield of anxiety and fear. I walked out of that courthouse feeling lighter than I had in weeks. My father tried to approach me in the parking lot, but his lawyer pulled him back, reminding him the order was already in effect. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. That night, I got a call from Madison, my cousin who'd been filming on Christmas. She was 22, about to graduate from college, and I'd never been particularly close to her. "Aunt Sarah?" Her voice was hesitant. "I wanted to talk to you about something. Can we meet for coffee?" We met at a Starbucks halfway between our homes. Madison looked nervous, her hands wrapped around her latte like it was a lifeline. "I sent you something," she said quietly. "Check your email." I pulled out my phone and opened my inbox. There was a message from her with a video attachment. I clicked on it, and Christmas night played out on my screen. Madison had filmed everything: my mother's greeting at the door, the nasty looks, Rachel throwing the folding chair, my father slapping me. The angle was clear, the audio perfect. "I thought you were just posting this online," I said, confused. "I was going to. I'm kind of known for my social media, and drama gets views." She looked ashamed. But then I watched it again, and I realized what it actually showed. This wasn't funny drama. This was abuse. "And you have a legal case." I stared at the video, this crystal clear evidence of everything that had happened. "Madison, this is..." "Thank you. This could make a huge difference." "There's more," she said. "I've been filming stuff at family gatherings for years. Just short clips for TikTok and Instagram. I went through my archives, and there are at least a dozen videos where your parents are saying awful things to you or about you. Where Rachel's being cruel. I have you on video last Thanksgiving when your mom accidentally spilled red wine on your white sweater and everyone laughed. I have Easter 2 years ago when your dad said you'd never amount to anything." My throat tightened. "You kept all of that?" "I keep everything. That's how social media works, you never know when you'll need content." She pushed her phone toward me. "It's all yours. Every video, every clip. I already sent the files to that email address." "Why are you doing this?" Madison looked down at her latte. "Because I saw the way they treated you, and I thought it was normal. I thought every family had a person they picked on. But watching that video from Christmas, seeing your face when Uncle Richard hit you, seeing Emma cry." Her voice cracked. "That's not normal. That's not okay. And I don't want to be part of a family that thinks it is." She told me she'd already moved out of her parents' house and was staying with friends. Her mother, my mother's sister, had been furious with her for refusing to delete the Christmas video. There had been a huge fight where Madison had been told she was betraying the family. "I told her I was betraying bullies, not family," Madison said. "There's a difference." My father was charged with simple assault. He posted bail within hours. Money had never been a problem for my parents. But the damage was done. The story spread through their social circle like wildfire. The respected accountant who hit his daughter on Christmas. The family torn apart by violence. My mother tried to control the narrative, telling everyone I'd provoked him, that I'd always been a problem child, that I was mentally unstable. Some people believed her. But Aunt Linda and Uncle Joe told the truth to anyone who would listen. Officer Rodriguez mentioned in her report that I'd been calm and cooperative while my father had been belligerent even with police present. The court date was set for February. In the meantime, I filed for a protective order that was immediately granted. My father couldn't come within 500 feet of Emma or me. My mother sent flying monkeys, distant relatives, family friends, to try to convince me to drop everything. I refused. Rachel showed up at my workplace 2 weeks after Christmas. Security had to escort her out after she caused a scene in the lobby, screaming about how I destroyed the family. My supervisor was sympathetic and helped me file a trespassing report. The hardest part was explaining everything to Emma's school counselor, making sure my daughter had support as she processed what she'd witnessed. Emma started therapy. So did I. We talked about cycles of abuse, about scapegoating, about how families sometimes fail us, and how we build new families from the people who truly care. February came. My father's lawyer tried to argue that it was a family dispute that got out of hand, that charges should be dropped, that a man shouldn't have his life ruined over one mistake. My lawyer presented the recording, the photos, the witness statements from Aunt Linda and Uncle Joe, the pattern of emotional abuse documented in my therapy records going back years. The judge wasn't impressed with my father's excuses. He was convicted of simple assault and sentenced to anger management classes, community service, and probation. It wasn't jail time, but it was something. It was acknowledgement that what he'd done was wrong. More importantly, it was freedom for me. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to beg for scraps of affection from people who would never give it. I didn't have to expose my daughter to toxic people just because we shared DNA. Emma and I started new Christmas traditions. We volunteered at a soup kitchen. We invited Aunt Linda and Uncle Joe over for dinner. We watched movies and baked cookies and laughed without walking on eggshells. My mother sent one last message in March: "I hope you're happy. You destroyed our family." I blocked her number and felt nothing but relief. The truth was, I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending the destruction wasn't already there. I stopped accepting blame for problems I didn't create. I stopped setting myself on fire to keep people warm who wouldn't even piss on me if I was burning. Some people called me vindictive. They said I should have just left quietly, should have taken the high road, should have protected my father from the consequences of his own actions. Those people got blocked too. Because here's what I learned: having your father arrested on Christmas isn't revenge. It's self-preservation. It's teaching your daughter that no one gets to hurt you, no matter who they are. It's refusing to be complicit in your own abuse. My family wanted me to stay small, stay quiet, stay grateful for whatever crumbs they tossed my way. They wanted a scapegoat, a punching bag, someone to blame when their own lives felt empty. I gave them consequences instead.